Let's be real, you are probably a goal getter. If you're an entrepreneur, a parent, life is happening. You've got all of the tabs open, mentally and probably also on your computer. You just have endless things that need to be done. It's exhausting. You never finish. So in this episode, I'm going to share my Overwhelm Antidote. And this is a step-by-step method that I use to go from feeling really stressed out to strategically clear and in aligned action in 30 minutes or less. Welcome back to the Becoming You podcast. I'm Rebecca, your host and guide, and today's episode or lesson is all about something we all experience, which is overwhelm. If you're listening to a podcast, let's be real. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like you are drowning in to-do list. You've got all of the tabs open, mentally and probably also on your computer, right? That's just life, literally until you die. So I'm an Enneagram 7, which is the visionary or the enthusiast, and I literally live in the energy of possibility, which sounds really fun and exciting until it's not, because it often leads to overwhelm. So in this episode, I'm going to share my Overwhelm Antidote. And this is a step-by-step method that I use to go from feeling really stressed out to strategically clear and in aligned action in 30 minutes or less. It's literally today where I'm wearing coveralls, denim, because I'm like, no, this is all about getting into aligned work. So what we're going to cover is how to clear your mind and get clarity when you feel really chaotic and life is lifing at you. My brain dump technique to get everything out of your head and into manageable categories, and then how to take strategic and quick, and most importantly, aligned action so that you can eliminate the overwhelm and really reclaim your energy and your clarity. And as always, if you want to get the full blueprint to reduce overwhelm and be able to dive in deeper, text the word balance to 949-503-9882, and you'll be able to grab the workbook and all of the resources that go along with this episode and the other lessons that are part of the balance blueprint. So first step we have to do is to just acknowledge the overwhelm. I came up with this Overwhelm Antidote, I think it was back in 2021. And I remember I was literally sitting in this office in my she shed, which I love the space. And I also am covered or surrounded by all the windows. And I love to write all over my windows. And I am never at a shortage for good ideas. And I was at this point where I'm like, everything is possible and I have no idea where to start. I have a million ideas, a million things to do. They all feel good. They all feel fun. They all feel aligned. And I was like just completely paralyzed with the overwhelm. I'm sure you felt that, right? As an entrepreneur, every ping, ding, buzz, it all adds to the pressure. I can remember in these moments, this wasn't even bad overwhelm. It wasn't like overwhelm of which I've experienced of like life is falling apart in every single category. This was like too much, more or less good stuff. However, I couldn't handle it. And I remember thinking, I actually said this to my husband. I'm like, I just want to walk away from my life. And he was laughing. He was laughing, not crying, fortunately. But it was because I just had all of these open tabs in my mind, in my life. And all of those open tabs is what sets the stage for the overwhelm. And that's why this antidote is so necessary. The second thing, before we dive into the step-by-step of how to get out of the overwhelm, what is the antidote? Something I call info-crastination. And this is a very real reality if you are multi-passionate, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just a driven human being. So what in the heck is info-crastination? It's this paralyzing cycle of gathering too much information and not knowing where to start. And so it leads to procrastination and inaction, and it keeps us stuck in a state of stress. It keeps us constantly consuming more data instead of actually getting things done. I will also say a really negative habit I have seen and an expensive habit, whether as an entrepreneur or just personal growth junkie, right, is it gets us buying the books, buying the courses, signing up for the things, and then doing nothing. And then it often sends us into guilt or shame because we feel like we have everything we need and we can't get into action. Sound familiar? I'm raising my hand here. So let's go through step by step the overwhelm antidote so you can get out of the overwhelm and the info-crastination. Step number 1, let's take in a breath. It's literally to clear your mind and get clarity. Well, how do you clear or quiet the mind? I like to remove myself from the physical space that's creating the overwhelm, literally. So if I'm in this office and I'm feeling overwhelmed, I literally just walk out of my office. My office is outside. I should say it's out of the house. So I literally will walk out into the yard, ideally take my shoes off, ground myself. I'll go for a walk if I have the time. If I don't have a few minutes, then I'll just do something to really recalibrate. This could be a quick meditation or breathwork session, again, walk in nature. Sometimes it's just like closing my eyes and reconnecting to the sound of my heart. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but the goal is that you're getting into a different headspace and into a different physical space. Because again, we can't solve the problem with the same brain that created it. So we have to change the mindset or our mind, and ideally, again, sometimes just walking out of the space. If you're in a room that's messy and you don't know where to start, walk out of the room. Walk out of the room. Look at something different. And then the next part of this clearing your mind and gaining clarity is to brain dump. And here's how I brain dump. First of all, close all the tabs. You can save them, bookmark them, right? But I like to, again, usually go outside somewhere I'm not going to be distracted by literally the million to-dos, or take all those to-dos, especially if they're Post-its, and get everything out of your head onto paper. What usually is the reality is it feels like we have 5,001 things to do, but we don't. It's usually 30 or maybe like 12. And often they can be grouped into a few different categories like work, health, relationships, and home. Those are typically it. Maybe fun, but that's the category you want to spend time on, right? With CPR. So once you kind of dump it into those categories, and you can literally do this by grabbing a piece of paper and drawing like a T across it and putting work, health, relationships, and home. So you dump it into those categories. And what you start to realize is, even let's say at work, I might actually have 30 things, but all of a sudden I'm going to see that, hey, 6 of them are related to the podcast. 7 of them are in my follow-up category. And they start to clarify themselves into projects or into focuses. And the more that you can see those buckets of focuses or projects, the less overwhelming it feels. And then you look and you say, on this list, what is the most important thing to do? What is going to create the most space, the most momentum, the most ease? Or the alternate, if you're so overwhelmed that you're like, the idea of like doing something to create more momentum and speed is nauseating, what is the thing that is sucking the most out of you energetically? Now, this does not mean you have to clean your office before you get something done, even though sometimes the office itself is adding to the overwhelm and maybe you need 15 minutes to do that. But I like to look at like, what is energetically draining me? So either if I do this thing, and maybe it's simple, it will put me into momentum where I will want to do more. Or what is the thing that I've probably been putting off that I'm feeling a little guilt or I'm feeling anxiety around, that if I get that off my plate mentally and physically, I'm going to feel better. And I'm going to then focus on more of the things that need to happen. So that's step 1, right? Step 1, clear your mind, get clarity by quieting the mind, getting into a different space, brain dumping, and picking the one thing. The second part of this is to create the path. Create the path to get it done. Now, this is not just like, oh, if I order the groceries, this is usually something a little bit bigger. That does not mean it needs to take more than 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes that's it. When you're creating the path, the first part of that is to check your expectations. Right? I want to remind you that a crappy first draft is better than doing nothing. Perfectionism is also a form of procrastination, and it does not need to be perfect. So ask yourself, what would a crappy first draft look like? If I can give myself permission for a completely crappy first draft that I can then edit and improve. And again, crappy first draft is first attempt. It is often putting a framework in. Then break it into smaller bite-sized steps. So one of my big goals for years was putting on a live event. That is a lot of moving parts and pieces, right? Especially if you haven't done it. So I looked at this and I was like, I want to do this, but it feels so hard. And I was having anxiety, but also FOMO because I wanted to create it. And so I said, what is the smallest, most manageable step I can take right now? That could be, why don't I write down the 10 things or the 10 categories that need to happen? Or why don't I call my dream venue and book an appointment? But it can be something simple. Let's say you want to launch a podcast. Before you go out and buy a mic and find a podcast editor, why don't you book a call with someone that already has a podcast? Or why don't you maybe not buy the course if you're already overwhelmed, but like download an article or set time to read it. Do something that's small and manageable. And the last part of this, getting help. There is no award that you win for figuring it out on your own. Being resourceful and resilient is great, but it's very likely that someone that's already in your circle, someone that's literally you could just reach out to, has the wisdom to guide you, right? There's no prize for going solo. So collaboration accelerates progress. And I know for me, I get people all the time that are like, hey, Rebecca, I want to do this. How do I do it? I have 1 or 2 things that I say. I either say, hey, I've recorded a podcast episode on that, or I've written something on that. Let me send it to you. Read through it. If you have more questions, let's chat, depending on if they're a potential client or a friend, or book time with me. But usually I actually have a resource for it. So just ask the person or have an introduction. Ask someone. You can also put this on social media. The one thing is be careful with people that haven't done the thing that you want to do, giving you advice. Only take advice from happy, successful people who have gone where you want to go. So that's number 2, creating the path. Check your expectations. giving yourself permission for a crappy first draft, and then break it into bite-sized steps and then ask for help. And then the last final step is getting into action. Again, why I'm wearing my denim. So the first part of getting into action is to set a deadline. Again, this doesn't necessarily need to be on the full project, even though that's a good idea. It could be on the smaller steps. But there's a reality, and I call this Parkinson's Law. Well, I don't call it that. Someone calls it Parkinson's Law, is that tasks will take the amount of time that you allocate for them. So if you give yourself a year to do something, you'll probably actually take a year and a half. If you give yourself a month, maybe 5 weeks. Just depends on how good you are at hitting deadlines. If you give yourself 30 minutes, you'll get it done in 30 minutes. It should be realistic, but short, so you can get it done quickly without letting it drag on. I mean, this is kind of part of that. What can I get done every day? Not about how effective or productive I am, but like, what is the thing? And is it actually gonna take more time if I put this off versus just taking care of it? So that's the first thing, is really set a short, realistic goal and then get accountability. Okay, there is a study that quotes a stat that you're 65% more likely to complete a goal if you commit to someone else. And this is the game changer. If you set a specific accountability appointment, you are 95% more likely to accomplish the goal. That is typically free. So find a business bestie or a friend that you're like, hey, let's commit this time together. You can call this a co-work or body doubling session. Often in my communities, I build in these body doubling or cave days where we, for 1 hour, work on a task that's usually the thing that we're putting off. And people get off the hour and they're like, this was the most productive, not only productive time I had this week because it's head down, they're not getting distracted by their phone or emails, but they also feel so good and they're in momentum, and you can create this for yourself. And then the last is making a move today. So you're listening to this or watching this, and I don't want you to be like, oh, this is great, I'm going to do this next week, right? Do something today. You can literally take one small action today. Book the meeting, send the email, schedule the appointment, like set the wheels of achievement into motion. Right? You don't have to live in overwhelm. And with the Overwhelm Antidote, you can clear your mind, you can get clarity, you can take action in 30 minutes or less. I will tell you, if you're just feeling kind of overwhelmed on a Monday, like what do I do first? You can do this in like 10 minutes or less. But the key is to start small and be really strategic. And remember, if you want to get the full Balance Blueprint workbook and learn more techniques like this, text the word balance to 949-503-9882 to grab your copy. And just thank you for tuning in. My goal for you is to feel empowered, to take control of your time, your energy, your focus. And of course, always join me on the Becoming You podcast. Listen in, share your favorite episodes, connect with me and let me know what you're loving. But I am here to give you more tools to lead a rich, fulfilling, impactful, and hopefully a bit balanced life.